Disenchantment Part 3, let's go! We've established the characters and setting in Part 1, we've set up a bunch of mysteries in Part 2, time to reveal some of those secrets. Wait a minute, why are all these episodes about world building and character development? Okay, judging by the intro, you can probably tell that Disenchantment Part 3 is not the season I expected to get. However, I feel like this has always been a series that has run up against the audience's expectations. Is it an episodic comedy? Is it a fantasy adventure show? Is it about solving mysteries and rewriting history? Who knows, genre definitions are fraught with danger. So for Part 3, let's take a look at how Disenchantment evolved, how it fits in with these genre archetypes, and see if we can figure out where the series is going. The biggest change in Part 3, and in my opinion its biggest improvement, is that Disenchantment has finally embraced serialization. This could be considered a negative if you're looking for a strictly episodic show like The Simpsons, but this approach suits Disenchantment better. Part 2 struggled in juggling its overarching story with its desire to do standalone adventures. It would be jarring to see them pull on the strings of one plotline and then seemingly forget about it in the very next episode. Whereas in Part 3, they do a much better job linking the episodes together. The main character's goals are more clearly defined. There are many different problems that they need to pursue. So they can send Bean and Elfo off on a Steamland quest for 3 episodes to keep things moving. But more importantly, their character development can be told through that specific story arc. They can link Bean and Elfo's themes together in a more focused way, without losing track of the overall narrative. I know this sounds like storytelling 101, but this is a pretty big shift away from the more haphazard Futurama approach. The story is structured in a way that takes advantage of Disenchantment's greatest strength, its sense of exploration and wonder. It's always taking the characters to new places, immersing them in a completely unfamiliar world. Some of these are revisits to previous locations, but with new wrinkles. Like what kind of secrets would Prince Derek find in the Enchanted Forest? How would Elfo fit in a place like Steamland? Although honestly, Steamland is such an imaginative and visually interesting place, they could do half a dozen episodes per season there. Personally, my favorite setting this year was the underground world of the Trogs. Maybe it was because of how much Part 2 hyped up this place, but they definitely delivered here. You'd think it would just be a bunch of mining jokes in these caves, but the Trogs have a lot going on. Let's check out their magic mushrooms and have a drug trip. Now let's gaze upon these crystal waters. How about a mysterious shrine? Oh, and a lava pit. You gotta have a lava pit. The Trogs themselves have this amusing no-nonsense and deadpan demeanor about them. They're difficult to read. You're never sure what's going on in their heads. So they're a great vehicle for comedy. They'll surprise the audience with a sarcastic or cutting response, or else they'll play the straight man to the complete insanity they're witnessing. Basically, I love these creepy weirdos, and I look forward to seeing more of them in Part 4. Despite introducing the Trogs and showing us new layers of their mysteries, Disenchantment continues playing things extremely close to the vest. It's a pretty surprising move at this point in the story. You'd think a shift to serialization would lead to major revelations at the end of story arcs, that we wouldn't be so much in the dark. However, I would argue that this issue is snowballing even further. There are relatively few answers provided in Part 3. In fact, they threw completely new puzzles at us to solve, most notably a family curse that afflicted King Zog and his ancestors. You thought Dagmar's side of the family was the only one with a mysterious backstory? Bean's got more curses to deal with than an Atlanta area sports fan. Now to their credit, they do throw in a lot of hints regarding these elements. They drop a pretty explicit clue in episode 2, for example. This continues to be an extremely meticulously designed show. But there are so many mysteries stacked on top of each other that it sometimes feels like the writers are shuffling them around randomly, just revisiting them whenever they feel like it. They'll totally abandon a subplot from Part 2, and then boom, they'll sideswipe us with it when we're not expecting it. As a result, it feels more like multiple storylines are competing with each other for screen time rather than being one cohesive narrative. We've got Dreamland versus Team Dagmar versus the Secret Society versus the Elves versus Steamland versus the Ogres versus probably Hell itself. At this rate, I fully expect God to be the villain of the whole thing. There are so many plot lines going on. Look, I obviously love a good mystery, but I think Disenchantment's obsessive secrecy is hurting its overall narrative. I legitimately have no idea what any of these people actually want. I understand that there's a secret society that does nefarious things, and each other, but the actual relationships don't make sense. They won't let us peek behind the curtain with any of their characters, and it's pretty frustrating. I can't understand the severity of Bean's danger if I don't understand the threat. It's unclear what she's running from, and it's hard to tell when actual progress has been made. It feels like I'm watching Mulholland Drive in tiny 5-minute increments over the course of several months. It's fascinating, and I'm positive it's building towards something cool, but in the meantime, it's this fuzzy, incomprehensible dream. So yeah, I continue to be frustrated by Disenchantment's pacing. I admit, I was initially pretty disappointed by the back half of Part 3, because I expected more payoff. I expected more episodes like the first two. I started to wonder, how much world building is too much world building? Are we stuck in this infinitely long Act 2? However, after reviewing some of the episodes again, I think I had slightly the wrong mindset going in. The show loves throwing mysteries at the audience and constantly teasing us, but honestly, they don't really matter, at least not yet. At its core, what Disenchantment really cares about is its character drama. This is fundamentally a character-driven series. It has the trappings of this grand, intricately designed adventure, but its focus is always on character relationships, their inner struggles, and exploring themes. I think that's why this show isn't as funny as The Simpsons or Futurama. Their character-driven approach makes rapid-fire gags or random cutaway jokes less of a priority. One thing I noticed about Part 3 in particular is how it loves taking a bizarre, brazenly stupid situation and somehow wringing actual human drama out of it. Like this argument between Bean and Dagmar is ridiculously silly, with Bean doing a terrible impression of her mother. Most of this convo is them arguing about how bad this performance is. But suddenly, amidst all this insanity, they start spitting real hard truths at each other. The dopey comedy gets played for drama instead of laughs. Or they get mixed together, like with Elfo and the boat. The concept of Elfo falling in love with a boat is cuckoo bananas. But given the context of the previous episode and its state of vulnerability, I get it. It's one of the dumbest subplots I've ever seen, but somehow is kind of poignant. Same thing with King Zog and Freckles. Why is this scene of Bean talking to a wooden puppet making me tear up a little? Damn you, Disenchantment. Part 3, with its focus on world building, is doing a great job of its secondary cast. There are so many minor randos that I just enjoy seeing. Like this Steamland lady has barely any screen time, but she's engaging every time she appears. Mora the mermaid has such a snarky and nuanced personality, her moments with Bean are absolutely captivating. And I still have no idea what to make about this guy, but frankly, I'm just here to listen to Richard Ayoade talk. I really liked what they did with Derek and Una this year. I was totally on board for a wacky King Derek storyline, and they delivered. Truly a man of the people, that Derek. For Una, I love seeing her team up with Bean. They have a very offbeat and endearing relationship. Una is the best. My biggest disappointment, from a character perspective, is probably King Zog. His starting and ending points are extremely well done, but woof, that middle run of episodes is rough. Was not a fan of that honking. The plot basically put him out of commission, and they had limited ways to progress his story while Bean was away. So things got kinda drawn out by necessity. Elfo gets the award for Most Improved between parts 2 and 3. I think they're hitting a better balance between the naive fish-out-of-water Elfo and the irritable, cynical Elfo. He still complains sometimes and is annoying to others, but he's less likely to bitch and moan to Bean about their situation. We get a lot more sad Elfo than bitter Elfo, which suits his character better. Also, he has a lot of funny interactions with the Trogs, which is a nice breezy change of pace for how the rest of the world treats him. Part 3 is an extremely important season for Bean in terms of character development. We're seeing an even more focused and goal-oriented version of her. She just can't be as impulsive as in previous episodes. She has to be cautious around all of these shady characters. More and more responsibilities are put on her shoulders, and she actually rises to the challenge. We also get to see Bean explore her first serious romantic relationship. She opens up to Mora about her past issues and wants to share quiet, tender moments with her. This is a pretty far cry from Part 1, where Bean only wanted to party and have fun. To be clear, Bean is still a goofball and stuff, that aspect hasn't changed, but we're starting to see a real maturity in her. I really like how she's developed as a character over the first 30 episodes. Somewhat surprisingly, Lucy fell out of focus in Part 3. Splitting him up from Bean left him somewhat purposeless for a while. They mostly spent that time giving him a little extra character development, or else he'll take charge in a wacky B-plot. As Bean has developed more confidence in herself, they've moved away from the devil on Bean's shoulder dynamic in Part 3. I'm really interested in seeing where they go with Lucy in Part 4. He's in a pretty interesting place right now as a character. Speaking of Lucy, the folks over at Disenchantment sent me over some goodies to celebrate the release of Part 3. Now I love Disenchantment, and I love free stuff, so I was excited to see what was inside this box. And just like in the show, I received my own personal demon, a surprisingly soft personal demon. Here's a corresponding blanket for my very, very burgundy couch. I got a King Zog Funko Pop figure, this Disenchantment cup with some popcorn, a 2021 calendar for my wall, and finally Disenchantment The Untold Tales. I'd never actually known they produced a book for this series. It's this short little graphic novel containing an original story. I really like the artwork in it. It kind of makes me want to order a bunch of Simpsons comics now. Overall, I think Disenchantment Part 3 is an improvement over the previous two. The jokes are landing better in general, and the serialization has improved the storytelling and the character arcs. In my opinion, Part 3 contains two of Disenchantment's greatest episodes ever. Episode 1, Subterranean Blues, demonstrates its potential as a fantasy adventure show, constantly giving the audience new locations to visit, shocking betrayals, and big cliffhanger moments. And Episode 6, Last Splash, demonstrates its potential for character drama, this lonely little bottle episode centered around love and loss. It's clear between these two episodes alone that the show has some range. I think I was critical of the back half of episodes because I worry the show is squandering its potential, that their desire to have the big reveal later forces the plot to stagnate now, that all of their storylines pile up and seemingly make little progress. I still think that's a valid criticism. It's hard to pin down sometimes what the central conflict of the season is. But despite some of my expectations, Disenchantment Part 3 essentially had 10 episodes that made me like the characters even more and made me even more invested in their world. A show lives and dies by its characters, and I think Disenchantment is getting that part right. They have put so much effort into their world building and character development that when the time comes, I really hope that they stick the landing. Here's to hoping. Also, Prince Merkimer has a subplot about Weekend at Bernie's or something.